How many errors can we find in a text that claims to be from an all-knowing God before we question its truth? If God is all-knowing, wouldn't his instructions reflect perfect knowledge of the natural world and human nature? Yet, some biblical laws, like the virginity test in Deuteronomy 22:13-21, seem rooted in flawed human understanding rather than divine wisdom. Let's take a closer look. Deuteronomy 22:13-21 describes a law addressing accusations against a woman's virginity. This law requires the woman's family to provide proof of her chastity, typically in the form of blood-stained bedsheets. If the required evidence isn't found, the consequences are severe. Here's the passage. Suppose a man marries a woman, but after going into her dislikes her and makes up charges against her, slandering her by saying, "I married this woman, but when I lay with her, I did not find evidence of her virginity." The father of the young woman and her mother shall then submit the evidence of the young woman's virginity to the elders of the city at the gate. The father of the young woman shall say to the elders, "I gave my daughter in marriage to this man, but he dislikes her, and now he has made up charges against her, saying, 'I did not find evidence of your daughter's virginity. But here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity.' Then they shall spread out the cloth before the elders of the town. The elders of that town shall take the man and punish him. They shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, which they shall give to the young woman's father, because he has slandered a virgin of Israel. She shall remain his wife. He shall not be permitted to divorce her as long as he lives. If, however, this charge is true, that evidence of the young woman's virginity was not found, then they shall bring the young woman out to the entrance of her father's house, and the men of her town shall stone her to death, because she committed a disgraceful act in Israel by prostituting herself in her father's house. So you shall purge the evil from your midst." This law is not only harsh, but relies on flawed assumptions about female anatomy and virginity. Let's explore why this test is deeply problematic and what it reveals about the Bible's claims of divine authorship. The virginity test in Deuteronomy relies on assumptions that modern science has completely disproven. Let's break it down. First, it's important to note that not all women bleed during their first sexual encounter. The idea that bleeding is a universal sign of virginity is simply false. One major misunderstanding involves the hymen, which for centuries has been incorrectly regarded as a universal marker of virginity. Essentially, this belief assumes that the hymen's condition definitively indicates whether a woman has ever had sexual intercourse, a widely accepted notion that science has proven to be entirely inaccurate. The truth is, the hymen is not a reliable indicator of virginity at all. It is a thin membrane that varies greatly between individuals. For some women, it stretches or tears naturally during everyday activities such as exercising, using tampons, or even without any specific cause. For others, the hymen can remain intact even after intercourse. Now, here's where it gets even more devastating, and it's something we have to really think about. Given how this test worked, it's highly likely that innocent women were falsely accused and killed because of it. Think about it. The virginity test relied entirely on flawed evidence, the assumption that the hymen is a reliable indicator of virginity. But science shows this isn't true. Some women are born without a hymen entirely, while for others, the hymen may stretch or tear long before marriage due to everyday activities. Now imagine being a woman in that time. You marry, but on your wedding night, the cloth doesn't show the so-called proof of your virginity. Your husband, whether out of suspicion, anger, or even malice, accuses you of dishonoring your family. What happens next? You're dragged out, humiliated, and stoned to death, executed for something that isn't even your fault. And let's not pretend this was just a rare occurrence. In a society where women's worth was tied to their chastity, these laws reflected the deeply patriarchal structure of ancient Israelite society. Women's social and legal status often revolved around their roles as daughters, wives, and mothers, with strict expectations of sexual purity. The virginity test, as outlined in Deuteronomy, relied on flawed assumptions about female anatomy and offered limited recourse for women falsely accused. While there were penalties for a man who made false claims, the burden of proof rested heavily on the woman and her family, an imbalance that left room for misuse and injustice. In many cases, these laws not only failed to protect innocent women, but also perpetuated their vulnerability within the legal and cultural systems of the time. How many lives were lost because of this? How many innocent women faced this ultimate punishment simply because of human ignorance and a flawed test? It's horrifying to think about, but it's also a reality we have to confront. This law wasn't just unjust, it was deeply harmful, and it reflects the limitations of human understanding, not the wisdom of an all-knowing God. The laws in the Bible were presented as a cornerstone of the covenant between God and the Israelites. They served multiple purposes: establishing a relationship with God, reflecting His holiness, promoting justice, and shaping Israel as a distinct nation. These laws were not merely spiritual guidelines, but also societal frameworks meant to regulate daily life, resolve disputes, and maintain order. From a theological perspective, these laws symbolized divine authority and perfection. They were given to demonstrate God's wisdom and righteousness, as well as to set Israel apart from the surrounding nations. God's intent, as conveyed through Moses, was that these laws would be a witness to His justice and inspire admiration from other peoples. But if these laws were designed to reflect God's perfect justice, then they should hold up to scrutiny, not just in their original context, but also in light of what we now understand about fairness, evidence, and human diversity. Are they as flawless and just as they claim to be? Today, we have a deeper understanding of human anatomy and physiology that highlights why the virginity test in Deuteronomy 22 was fundamentally flawed. The hymen is not a reliable indicator of virginity. Many women are born with little or no hymenal tissue, and others may have their hymen stretch or tear due to non-sexual activities like exercise or tampon use. Not all women bleed during first intercourse. Bleeding depends on individual anatomy, and many women naturally don't experience it. If God is truly all-knowing, why didn't His laws reflect these scientific truths? Why not provide laws that acknowledged human diversity and protected women from unjust accusations based on faulty evidence? Why didn't He include additional protections to prevent innocent women from being wrongfully executed? For example, God could have explicitly stated, "Do not rely solely on bloodstains or physical evidence to determine a woman's virginity." God could have clarified that the hymen is not a reliable indicator of virginity. If these clarifications had been included, countless innocent lives could have been spared. This raises an important question. If the Bible contains laws based on flawed human understanding, can it truly be divine? An all-knowing God would likely not make mistakes in biology, justice, or morality. Yet the virginity test reflects a lack of understanding about female anatomy, a legal system that leaves women vulnerable to false accusations and unjust punishment, cultural biases rather than timeless universal truth. To evaluate whether a religion's teachings truly come from an all-knowing God, we must take these steps. A. Examine the claims for consistency with reality. Do the teachings align with what we know scientifically, historically, and morally? B. Evaluate the morality of the laws. Do they promote justice and fairness, or do they perpetuate ignorance and harm? C. Ask if the teachings reflect human culture. Are they timeless, or do they mirror the values and misconceptions of their time? D. Consider the role of ignorance. If the laws contain harmful errors based on human misunderstanding, how can they come from an all-knowing God? How many errors in a supposedly divine text must we find before questioning its truth? If God is all-knowing, His words should reflect perfect knowledge. But the virginity test and other flawed laws highlight human ignorance, suggesting the Bible was written by people shaped by their time and culture. If these teachings are demonstrably false, how much more of the religion might be based on human misconceptions rather than divine truth? These are questions worth asking. Questions that lead us closer to understanding what is real and what is not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thought-provoking content.